You've heard of Roman victories. You've seen the glory, the power, the legions marching with discipline and strength. But what about the Roman soldiers who didn't win? The ones who were captured, the ones who fell into enemy hands. What really happened to them? The truth? It wasn't heroic. It wasn't noble. It was brutal, forgotten, betrayed, broken. Today, we're not talking about the conquerors. We're talking about the captured. And their stories will shock you. Stick with me, because this part of Roman history is rarely told. Let's rewind a little. The Roman Empire lasted for over 1,000 years. At its height, it stretched from Britain in the west, Syria in the east, from the Rhine River to the deserts of North Africa. Millions lived under its rule. But how was that empire built? Not with politics, not with peace treaties. It was built with swords, with shields, with legions. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers gave their lives for Rome. They marched for weeks, fought in unfamiliar lands, slept in the mud, and obeyed orders without question. They fought in Spain, in Gaul, in Dacia, in Egypt, in Armenia, in Judea. They died in deserts, in forests, in swamps, in mountains. We've all heard about the victories. Caesar in Gaul, Scipio in Carthage, Augustus defeating Mark Antony. But every victory had its price, and every once in a while, Rome lost, sometimes badly. When Roman soldiers were captured alive, their fate was worse than we can imagine today. Because captivity wasn't just about survival. It was about identity. It was about honor. It was about losing everything. So what exactly happened to them? That's what we're here to uncover. 1. Rome's mindset. Capture means shame. Before we get into what the enemies did to Roman soldiers, we need to understand something important. Rome hated weakness. The Roman military wasn't just a job. It was a sacred duty. When a young man became a Roman soldier, he swore an oath, the sacramentum. This oath said, "I will never flee from the enemy. I will always obey my commander. I will fight to the death, if ordered." Breaking that oath was not just a failure. It was a betrayal. If a Roman soldier was captured, it meant, at least in the eyes of Rome, that he had failed to die for his empire. That's why surrender wasn't just a scourge, it was criminal. Some Roman generals, like Lucius Cornelius Sulla and later Julius Caesar, made examples of returned prisoners. They punished them in front of others, sometimes publicly, sometimes violently. Rome's view was simple. If you didn't come back on your shield, you didn't deserve to come back at all. Captured soldiers were often stripped of honors, denied future pay, removed from service. Some were even branded as traitors. Imagine surviving torture in enemy hands, only to be called a coward by your own people. The worst part? That shame didn't stop with the soldier. It followed his family. His sons, his name, honor, and identity were everything in Rome. To be captured was to lose both. 2. What the enemy did to Roman prisoners. Now, let's cross enemy lines. What actually happened to a Roman soldier once he was captured? There wasn't one answer. It all depended on the enemy and the moment. Sometimes, enemies were out for revenge. Other times, they had a strategy. Let's go deeper into each type of enemy and how they treated captured Romans. A. Gauls and Celts. Rage and ritual. The Gauls were fierce tribal people who lived in what is now France, Belgium, and parts of northern Italy. To them, Romans were invaders, destroyers of their temples, enslavers of their children. So when they got the upper hand, they took it out on the bodies and minds of the Romans they caught. Captured soldiers were beheaded and displayed on spikes or nailed to trees, forced into combat games, gladiator style, but for entertainment, not money, burned alive in wooden cages as religious offerings, tortured slowly, often for days, in front of cheering crowds. And this wasn't rare. It was part of their warrior culture, honor through blood. The Battle of the Allia in 390 BC is one of the earliest examples. The Gauls not only crushed the Romans, they sacked the entire city of Rome afterward. Many captured Romans were never found again. Rome never forgot this. The phrase, "the Gauls are coming," was used to scare Roman children for generations. B. Parthians and Persians. Enemies with a plan. Parthia was Rome's biggest rival in the east. They weren't chaotic like the Gauls. They were smart, wealthy, and organized. When the Parthians won a battle, they used captured Roman soldiers as tools, forced laborers for imperial projects, border guards in faraway regions, human shields in future battles. After the crushing defeat at Carrhae in 53 BC, the Parthians captured over 10,000 Roman soldiers. But instead of killing them, they scattered them across the empire. Some were taken to Margiana, near modern-day Turkmenistan. Others may have reached the Chinese border. These men built fortifications and served local rulers. Many never saw their homes again. Some archaeologists even believe a village in western China, called Liqian, may have Roman ancestry. Was it true? No one knows for sure. But the idea that Roman soldiers became strangers in a land they didn't even know existed, that's real enough. 3. Germanic tribes. Humiliation as a weapon. The Germanic tribes were Rome's toughest enemies in the forests of northern Europe. Unlike the organized kingdoms of the East, the Germanic world was made up of dozens of independent tribes. They were wild, proud, and deeply hostile to Rome. When they captured Roman soldiers, they didn't just want to kill them, they wanted to humiliate them, to break them in body and spirit. Here's what some tribes did with their Roman captives. Force them into slavery, not the kind with chains and overseers, but personal tribal slavery. Some were made to care for livestock, clean the homes of enemy warriors, or carry supplies during tribal migrations, use them in rituals. Some Roman soldiers were sacrificed to the gods of the Germanic people. This could involve hanging, burning, or being drowned in sacred lakes. Sometimes they were bound and left as offerings in the woods. Mock their discipline. One chronicler described how a Roman centurion, once captured, was dressed in rags, given a wooden sword, and forced to parade around a village while children threw mud at him, cut off their hair and ears, symbols of shame in Roman culture. The psychological warfare was intense. Rome prided itself on strength, order, and dignity. The Germanic tribes tore that apart piece by piece. And this wasn't just cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was revenge. Rome had burned their homes, taken their land, enslaved their families. Now, when the tables turned, they made sure every Roman prisoner felt that history. For the Battle of Tudberg Forest, a national trauma. We have to stop and talk about one of the worst disasters in Roman history. The Battle of the Tudberg Forest, 9 AD. 3 entire Roman legions, Legion 17, 18, 19, were wiped out by Germanic tribes led by a former Roman ally named Arminius. It was supposed to be a routine march through the forest. Instead, it became a massacre. Over 20,000 Roman soldiers were killed or captured. And those captured? We don't know their full fate, but we have some terrifying clues. Some were crucified. Ancient sources mention Roman prisoners being nailed to trees, left to die slowly in the forest as a message to Rome. Some had their heads cut off and placed on spears. These were carried through tribal ceremonies as trophies. Some were enslaved, forced to live in the same lands they were once meant to conquer, now serving the very people they came to subdue. The worst part? The legions were never rebuilt. Rome erased their names from the military records. For the rest of Roman history, no new legions were ever numbered 17, 18, or 19. It was as if they had never existed. But they did, and many of them died in captivity, unknown, unburied, unremembered. 5. What happened to Roman soldiers who survived captivity? Let's imagine you're one of the lucky ones. You're captured. You survive. Maybe you're enslaved for years. Then something changes. Maybe Rome wins a new war and negotiates your release. Maybe your captors sell you back in a prisoner exchange. Maybe you escape. You return to Roman territory. Do you get a hero's welcome? No. You're looked at with suspicion. Whispers follow you wherever you go. Did he really fight, or did he surrender early? Did he serve the enemy? Did he break his oath? You try to rejoin the army, but you're turned away. You try to return to your village, but neighbors keep their distance. Some former captives were even exiled, sent to live far from their old communities. Others were quietly recruited as spies or informants, their knowledge of enemy territory now a useful tool. But many simply disappeared. They changed names, changed cities, lived quiet, anonymous lives. Some never recovered from the trauma. Ancient letters describe former soldiers who had nightmares for years, who wanted the streets, who drank too much, who couldn't hold jobs. Today we call it PTSD. Back then, it was called weakness. Rome offered no care for the mental wounds of war. 6. The forgotten captives in the East. When we think of captured Roman soldiers, we often imagine them falling into the hands of barbarian tribes. But some of the most tragic and fascinating cases happened far from the forests of Germany or the fields of Gaul. They happened in the East. The Roman Empire fought dozens of wars against Eastern powers, the Parthians, the Sassanids, and other Persian dynasties. These enemies weren't wild or disorganized. They were sophisticated, wealthy, and powerful. When they captured Roman soldiers, they didn't kill them right away. They used them after Carrhae. In 53 BC, one of the most embarrassing defeats in Roman history happened. The Battle of Carrhae. Crassus, one of Rome's richest and most powerful men, led over 30,000 soldiers into Parthian territory. He expected an easy win. He got a nightmare. Parthian horse archers decimated the Roman forces. Crassus was killed, and around 10,000 Roman soldiers were taken prisoner. What happened next? They vanished. Some sources say they were sent east of the borders of India, or even beyond. Others say they were absorbed into the Parthian army and forced to fight for their captors. The Chinese historian Ban Gu wrote about strange foreign soldiers fighting in Central Asia using Roman-style formations. He described a town, Lichien, where people had European features centuries later. Is it coincidence? Maybe, but it's entirely possible that Roman captives ended up as soldiers in lands thousands of miles from home, speaking languages they didn't know, under rulers they didn't understand. They never saw Rome again. No rescue missions came. No records were kept. They became ghosts of an empire that had forgotten them. 7. Religion, superstition, and the spiritual cost of capture. Romans didn't just lose their freedom when they were captured. Many felt they lost something even deeper, their spiritual identity. Roman religion was built around honor, ritual, and sacred duty. A soldier swore not just to Rome, but to the gods of Rome, Jupiter, Mars, Bellona, victory. To be captured was seen as an insult to those gods. It meant failure, not just in war, but in faith. Some believed that being in enemy lands, cut off from Roman temples, denied Roman prayers, put their souls in danger. And if they died in captivity, many feared they would not be welcomed by the gods in the afterlife. Romans believed in proper burial. A soldier who died far from home unburied could become a wandering spirit, a lemur, doomed to haunt the earth forever. Captured soldiers sometimes tried to make small shrines out of wood or dirt. They whispered Roman prayers in secret, hiding them from their captors. But over time, many gave up. Some converted to local religions, whether by choice or force. Others became bitter, silent, hollowed out. Faith had been their armor. Now it was cracked. 8. Famous cases of captured Romans. We've talked a lot about unknown soldiers, but even some famous Romans were captured. Let's look at a few examples. Gaius Dilius Vocula, a Roman general during the Batavian Revolt in 69 AD. He was caught in a trap set by Germanic rebels. He was taken, humiliated, and eventually killed, but not before writing down what he saw. His letters describe Roman soldiers being whipped, burned, and chained together by the neck. He begged for Rome to rescue them. No help came. Valerian, an emperor in chains, the only Roman emperor to ever be captured alive. In 260 AD, Valerian was defeated by the Persians and taken prisoner by King Shapur I. What followed was beyond humiliating. Valerian was used as a footstool by Shapur, forced to kneel and allow the Persian king to step on his back as he mounted his horse. After years in captivity, Valerian was either executed or died in chains. Some say his skin was flayed and stuffed with straw to create a trophy. Rome tried to erase the memory of this, but it was too big to hide. If even an emperor could be reduced to that, what hope did a common soldier have? 9. Ransom, rescue, and neglect. Now you might be wondering, did Rome ever try to rescue its captured soldiers? The answer, sometimes, but it was rare and it depended on politics. If a soldier was important, an officer, a noble, a senator's son, Rome might pay a ransom. They might send envoys, negotiate, even swap prisoners. But for the average legionary, no gold, no negotiations. And even when soldiers were returned, they didn't always get a warm welcome. Rome didn't like to reward survival if it came through surrender. Some returning soldiers were discharged with no pension, denied land grants, told they couldn't wear their armor or medals again, refused burial in military cemeteries. It was cruel, it was political, and it sent a message to everyone else. Don't get captured. 10. Legacy, why this story matters. We remember the Roman Empire as a story of strength, powerful emperors, glorious victories, gleaming cities, unstoppable armies. But that wasn't the full truth, because for every victory, there was a defeat. For every statue, there was a forgotten grave. For every soldier who came home, there were 10 who didn't. Captured Roman soldiers were humans. They bled, they suffered, they hoped, they were broken, and they were erased. Their names were lost, their stories silenced, their fates hidden by an empire that only wanted to remember its strength. Today, we bring them back, not to celebrate their defeat, but to recognize their humanity, because real history isn't just about glory. It's about the cost of it. So now you know, Roman soldiers didn't just face swords and arrows. They faced betrayal, abandonment, and erasure. The truth behind Roman capture is not just brutal, it's deeply personal. And it still echoes today in how we treat soldiers, prisoners, and survivors of war. If you learned something new today, if this story made you think, hit that subscribe button. We uncover the real stories history books leave out, the ones that matter, the ones that make you question what you thought you knew. Thanks for watching. And remember, behind every empire are the voices that were never heard,